Welcome to JGL Law for You. JGL Law for You is a podcast by lawyers, but not for lawyers only. On JGL Law for You, we will be discussing a wide array of topics to help you navigate the many legal processes, developments in the law, other current events, and how they may affect you, your family, or your business. Today, we're diving into a topic that everybody hears about, sees about, but may not understand exactly what it is, number one. And number two, how is it involved in your domestic, your divorce, your family case? And today we're going to dive into that issue exactly, which is how can artificial intelligence affect the outcome or what goes into the litigating or negotiating of a family law case, specifically in the state of Maryland. And to help us today, we've got my partner, Chris Castellano from Joseph Green Long Lake. Chris, for the last decade, has focused his practice in family law in areas of divorce and financial issues, custody, and so forth. And we're going to talk today about the dangers, the risks, the problems, the concerns of artificial intelligence in family cases. Welcome, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start. Before you get to what goes inside the house, goes on the roof, we've got to build a foundation. Let's first talk about artificial intelligence. What is it? And is there only one kind of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, so artificial intelligence seems to be a concept that changes its definition or expands it at the very least, almost on a daily, weekly type basis. We all used to think about AI back in the day, for me at least, similar to Terminator, right? With Skynet and computers coming to life and thinking for themselves. And that's kind of ingrained in us in how we approach artificial intelligence. In the last 10 years, we started to see the flavor of AI of things like Siri, or now we have other search engines, whether it be Gemini or whatever it may be. But that's what I would consider kind of like dumb AI, right? It's not really thinking for itself. It's just searching for a database, and it gives you kind of nice pre-rendered answers.
Let me interrupt you for a second, just before we get to the more sophisticated side. So that's like where somebody goes on something like ChatGPT, right? Or something like that and says, write me a paragraph about the Southern Hemisphere. And then it just spits it right out, sort of out of a Wikipedia kind of thing. Is that what you're talking about? Sort of this simple kind of...
No, so that's actually I'll call it the next generation. I'm using a lot of generalized terms here because there's a lot more technical reality to it all. But you kind of have that first gen, if you will, with the Siri and whether it be even just the Google search bar, right? But now we have the generative AI. Generative AI is actually... It's still doing the same thing where it's searching databases, right? But it is a bit more sophisticated. And when I say a bit, I mean a lot of bit sophisticated by creating actual answers, generating, hence the generative AI, generating responses, whether it's in a narrative form or a technical form. And there's all different flavors of it, right? We have the ChatGPT, which everyone has heard about. You know, you have Copilot, which is on everyone's Windows now. You can see it in the bottom left. It's in the Bing browser. Google has Gemini. I don't have Apple, but an iPhone uses some level of, I think they call it advanced intelligence instead of artificial intelligence, but you'll start to see that they're playing with the terminology because they don't want to really call it that AI to make it confusing. So there's all different versions of it, but the one that we're all kind of familiar with recently and will be the topic of what we're talking about here is that ChatGPT flavor, where you can type in a prompt and, as you say, you spit out a discussion about the Southern Hemisphere.
So what exactly is the problem? If I'm a student and I want to do a paper, I pop in what I need. It does my work for me. If I'm a lawyer and I need to do a pleading, then I'm too lazy to look and do it myself. I spit in the information I need. It bangs it back at me. What's the big deal? What's the problem?
You know, it's interesting because when it comes to any type of advancement, right? Whatever it is, just name it. The convenience has always been the name of the game. And if we can increase convenience, so therefore we increase efficiency, and it frees us up to do other stuff, right? I mean, that's like a cultural discussion that we could have at some other point, but that's what it boils down to when it comes to this generative AI, right? Yeah, sure, it's convenient. It cuts down the time. It cuts down potentially on lawyer costs. But we have to be careful about interrupting our human thought processes. And the reason why I say it like that is I always hear about people using ChatGPT, students or whomever it may be, to write letters. In fact, I was thinking about our podcast here, and I saw a commercial watching football on Saturday. And I saw a commercial about a guy in a professional setting that was writing an email to his office. And he didn't like the email. He didn't like how it was very kind of angry, I guess, whatever it may be. But then he just pressed a button and boom, it was a professional sounding email and the person liked it, right? There's some ridiculous concept here. But that says a lot, right? It's using AI to change how other people can perceive you based on your own writing, and you pass it off as your own writing. Okay. So we can apply that and we can talk about the pleadings like a lawyer does it. But what I also want to focus on that a lot of people aren't focused on in our field is the everyday user that has access to ChatGPT, whether it be through Bing, because you can have ChatGPT, I think 3.5 through Bing, so it's free for everybody, to take their messages that they're sending to their spouse or their ex-spouse and then cleaning it up. Because, David, as you and I both know, we use emails, we use text messages, we use that stuff in our custody cases to identify if a parent is properly co-parenting, for instance, right? And that's golden type of evidence. And if you've got a person that is now washing all of their communications through generative AI to clean it, how does the court ever have an opportunity to see into how that person is approaching co-parenting? And yes, it cuts down on time. It makes it convenient for the user. And it may even make the discussion playing field, if you will, between the two parents a little calmer. But are we hiding the true facts that the court needs to be able to see? That's a concern of mine.
When you send messages or you funnel your message through generative artificial intelligence, whether it's like ChatGPT or something else, it tends to me, those that I've seen, takes the emotion out of the message. So what I've seen is that, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, is that the message becomes very stoic and staid and static. Whereas in family cases, they're anything but. So tell me a little bit about that. Doesn't it you sort of lose the feeling for the person who's sending the message in a certain way? Isn't that right?
Oh, you lose that personal human touch, that flair, right? Everybody has their own style. My writing is going to be very different from your writing. It's very different from the person on the street's writing. And I think, you hit the nail on the head is that when we have parents that start funneling their communications through ChatGPT, we're going to distill out and rinse out their personal flair. And then all of a sudden we can't see, hey, are they genuine with what they're saying about the doctor's appointment scheduling or after school activities or whatever it may be? That's a big concern.
So, Chris, I want to ask you about how, if at all, you should use, one of these generative AI software. Once a lawyer gets his or her case into the courtroom, right? And with the growth of communication via email, via text message, I know that you, like me, often will use emails from parties either to benefit one party or to cross-examine the other. So what happens in a situation where you're cross-examining your client's spouse, for example, and you've got a series of emails from that spouse that have been scrubbed through AI in some fashion, and you're trying to use the tone, content of that email or text message, for that matter, in order to cross-examine that individual. And that individual says, well, hold on, I didn't really say that. I used ChatGPT to send it for me. What do you do? And is it still something that you can use to cross-examine your witness with?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about cutting edge discussions of what's going to be happening, right? Ultimately, ChatGPT, you are the author of the document that you use ChatGPT for, right? We didn't have these types of discussions or questions about whether they're the true author when words started coming out with spell check and grammar check, right? But grammar check changes. It uses a low-level form of, if you will, artificial intelligence, but really just database scrubbing in order to clean up and change your sentence structure, clean up your grammar. So it is somewhat similar, but now it's much, much more advanced. What it's going to do, I think, is cause a significant amount of examination prior to getting into the courtroom, right? In the discovery phase, we're going to have to really look long and hard at these documents. We're going to have to compare, okay, does this text message, does this one that's a little bit longer, does this look scrubbed? And I don't know about you, David, but I talk to my clients all the time and I tell them the same spiel that you know your spouse or your ex-spouse better than I ever will. So take a look at this. Does this sound like something that they would write themselves, or does this look like it went through ChatGPT? And hopefully, and I say hopefully, and I mean it genuinely, that there is some communication that wasn't cleaned or distilled and that we have that ability to compare. But we're on the very precipice of this question here, and it remains to be seen if courts, at least in our jurisdiction, are going to be, how they're going to view generative AI communications.
It seems to me that if I'm the cross-examiner in that circumstance, and you have a witness who says, I didn't write that, I used ChatGPT to write it. And it's something that could be used in a negative fashion as to that particular witness. It seems to me that, oh, it wasn't me, it was ChatGPT, is not a particularly good answer in a courtroom setting. I mean, if you sent it, right, you sent it. And so the reason I'm asking this question is because I'm going to assume there's a lot of folks out there who are saying to themselves, I don't want to take the time to tap all this stuff out. I want to read in a couple of concepts into ChatGPT and send the message for me. But it's still coming from you.
It's still coming from you, but I'm with you. The moment I get somebody that admits that I put this through ChatGPT, I didn't write it, all of a sudden the conversation turns from did you or did you not write this through ChatGPT of, do you care so little about co-parenting and your kids that you can't even spend an extra 5 minutes to write the communications? That's not the kind of cross-exam you want to sit through in front of a judge, right? You want to make sure that that judge is looking at you as somebody who's dedicated. And ChatGPT, for all of its benefits of being able to come up with various different interesting responses to various different prompts, in this setting, I don't think that's where you want to take the shortcuts.
What I see, and like I said, in terms of messages that have come to my clients, that my clients have sat using generative AI, and also in my own separate communications with people. My wife will send me, for example, stuff all the time for, say, she wants to do a social media post, for example, and she knocks in this Chat GPT stuff, and it's like, okay, it looks like it came right out of an encyclopedia. And the reason I ask you that is, I mention that is that one of the things we have to do as lawyers is prepare papers or pleadings that need to get filed at the courthouse. Do you think it's a good idea to use generative AI to prepare those pleadings? And if so, why? And if not, what are the weaknesses of doing so?
Generally speaking, in our field and how I communicate with people, I never use certainties or absolutes. But David, I'm going to give you one here. I don't think a lawyer should ever use ChatGPT to prepare a pleading. I think the pitfalls and dangers are so extensive that there is no benefit to using ChatGPT to prepare a pleading. And I'm not trying to rip on OpenAI as a company and their tech, but the ability for these applications to develop a sound pleading, let's say a motion to modify custody, right? It's not there. It doesn't have the ability to examine the full swath of case precedent that we do on a daily basis. It doesn't have the ability to search up-to-date statutes and regulations, right? One of the most recent ChatGPT that people get that is free, I believe it's been updated through 2022. That is, I haven't looked into it, whether that one's been updated, but there's been laws and rules that have been put on the books since then. So you're talking completely out of date unless you're paying for it. And again, you neglect the ability to have your own flair, your own style in your writing. And style for what we do in our persuasive writing is just that. It's how we persuade the judge, right? And we need to be able to put in sentences, paragraphs that offer more than just the stoic response of this needs to change and this is why. We need that style.
What about the fact that, I mean, again, folks, for those of you who are listening out there, and I'm going to talk to you about counsel fees in a second, but those of you who are listening out there, unlike different other things, the U.S. Constitution applies to all 50 states, but family laws differ drastically from one state to the other. And what's the ability of ChatGPT to adjust what might go into a pleading dependent upon which state that you happen to be in?
Well, I think it depends on your prompt. I know I did a seminar about the dangers of AI relatively recently, and big talk was about the prompt and the accuracy of the prompt. So you put in as a Maryland lawyer, comma, da 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 da. And so it should bring that in. But I'll tell you the biggest danger, and that lawyers hear about these stories all the time, is that it will make up fictional law, usually case law. It will make up cases that just don't exist. And, I've seen it. I've seen it firsthand where, you get a pleading and, the court says, what is this case? Where they'll give you an opportunity and say, like, what's the citation? What's this? And it's not a good look. It's not a good look. And that was a case when someone was pro se and they submitted a ChatGPT flavored pleading, and that doesn't go over well. It's not a good situation.
No, I would think not. And I would also think, so now just to toggle for a second, all of our clients, we're all human beings, and we want to be careful of the money that we spend, most of us, in lots of different areas. And certainly when it comes to paying our lawyers, we want to try to watch our fees. Most of us do. Most of my clients do. I'm sensitive to it. I'm sure you are as well. Why, if I'm a client, why wouldn't I just say, I'll just use ChatGPT for this or for that, for an answer to interrogatory, for whatever it is you're asking me for? That's part one of the question. Part two of the question is, why don't I just represent myself pro se, and I'll do everything through using ChatGPT, and I won't have to pay a dime in legal fees? I know that's a two-part question. Their answers are very different, but I'm trying to put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Is it better for you to, I think that's always been the question, is it better and cheaper for the person to represent themselves? Because there's always been that next level of opportunity for the pro se individual to help out, right? For a while before ChatGPT, certainly, it was increasing services at the courts or other free legal aid type of options of, here's the form, fill out this form, you could do this, you could do that. And you would see, I'm sure you've had plenty of cases with pro se on the other side that made it quite far into a case and kind of hobbled their way through. ChatGPT, I don't think it's going to change the outlook that someone has when they're approaching their, as pro se, approaching their case. It's just going to make it look a little bit cleaner, a little bit more professional. But once you dig deeper, those mistakes are going to be more evident. And that's the problem, is it gives people a false sense of security that I'm putting this document in and wow, ChatGPT or Grok or Gemini have spit out this pleading that looks fantastic. It looks like what the lawyer on the other side's doing, so maybe it must be good. But then all of a sudden, the lawyer on the other side starts going through and says, what's this case? Lexis or Westlaw doesn't pop this case up. So what is this case? And then they file their opposition to it. And then they say, well, I can't find this case. I don't know what the deal is with that. The judge says during the hearing, what's this case? You haven't given it to me. And the next thing you know, the conversation isn't so much about the existence of the case as it is that pro se litigant is facing the threat of attorney's fees. And the judge wants to genuinely understand why they shouldn't order attorney's fees for you bringing in a false case to the discussion.
Mm-hmm. And if you're working with your own lawyer, isn't it also possible that when you start using this generative AI in doing the work that the lawyer asks you to do or sending something to the lawyer, isn't it also possible that it's so off base or so off in terms of strategy, tone, whatever it is, that you as the client may end up spending more money because your lawyer has to, instead of starting from scratch, now your lawyer has to go back and tear apart everything that you did and retool all of that?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Again, it goes back to in a lot of ways, it goes back to lack of style. And, you're taking out not only style, but now you've got inaccuracies and you've got to clean things up. And it does cause the lawyer to take even more time, right? And that's just, It's the idea of, I guess, cut your nose off to spite your face, right? You don't want to spend more time than necessary, so don't create the reasons to spend that more time.
I guess what you're saying at the end of the day is that divorce is not a plus and minus, it's not a tic-tac-toe board, right? It involves lots of emotions and complications and things that what's essentially a robot inside your phone or your computer doesn't get and isn't able to tap into. Is that right?
Yeah, the computer, I want to preface this by saying maybe in 5 years with quantum computing, this is an entirely different podcast. But until we get to that future, right now, yeah, the phone is never going to understand what you're going through in life. It's never going to understand what you went through 10 years ago. And so it's never going to be able to create that perfect writing, that text, that email, that pleading, that motion that's going to capture all of those different experiences and, your flavors of what you need to say. And ultimately, it's all about, do I want to spend the money now or spend it later? And that's always been the balancing act when we look at new inventions and the new options for convenience is it better for me to take advantage of this convenience now, or am I going to pay for it on the back end? And right now, where we are, there is a much greater chance that you pay for it on the back end if someone is to use ChatGPT or any other flavor.
Well, it sounds to me for you folks out there who are getting ready to or in the process of separating and divorce, that you ought to do what you tell your kids to do. You don't take the easy way out. In this particular case, resist the urge to use generative AI, ChatGPT, other means of generative AI, and instead contact a family lawyer, in particular, contact Chris Castellano. And how, Chris, would people be able to get hold of you?
Yeah, they can give me a call here at the office, 240-399-7900, ask to speak with me, or they can send me an email, ccastellano@jgllaw.com. And whether you want to talk about generative AI or more details about from our discussion, or just your case generally, I'd be happy to speak.
Sounds great. Chris, I think over the last half hour or so that we've been talking, I've got like 50 more questions, so we're going to have you come back. But this has been very, very informative, folks. I hope you got a lot of information from this. Reach out to Chris if you have other questions, and I hope that you join us next to him. I am David Bullitt, and this is JGL Law for You.